games or activities or quizzes like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, where students can work together to figure it out. I've done that on a live Google Meet and it works pretty well. We've talked about Google Jamboard a lot with GEG Alaska, and that's a great way to get students collaborating. And then on the bottom, it just shows some more screencasting tips that you can dive into later. The most important one I'm going to give is, or what I feel is the most important, is if you're going to screencast, try your best to turn your camera on so they can see you, because not only are they hearing your voice, but they can see your picture and make that connection to you. And I would try to screencast as much as possible. So maybe you find a really great instructional video on YouTube that another teacher does. I would really strongly suggest you replicate that. You make it your own so your students can feel more connected to you and build that classroom community. So this is just something that you guys can refer back to later, add ideas as you have them. It's a great place just for us to share and collaborate that way. Let's see. Yeah, so Kimber said she did a Kahoot today and it worked really well on a Meet. Yeah, Tammy says when asked, many kids say they would rather see and hear their teacher in a screencast instead of somebody random. That gives that personal connection. Erica says Jamboard is great, but I've had several students who seem to be unable to get into Jamboards while also in a Meet. I've had that issue actually with our school district because I was trying to get everybody on a Jamboard and we had about 100 participants on our meeting, but Jamboard only lets a certain amount in at a time. I think the amount was 50, so that impacted that. Yeah, so Kimber also says screencast is great because they can pause and take notes or repeat as needed, which is not something they can get from a live instruction activity as well. So yeah, you guys probably have become experts at knowing what works well with your students and what doesn't, because you guys have already, most of us, except YKSD, we haven't started school yet, but most of you guys have been doing this for a week or two by now and kind of figured out what works well for your students and what doesn't work well. So thank you for sharing those ideas. All right, so after you've established the goal of your Google Meet, and hopefully it's something that builds community and provides instruction, but maybe not you just talking the whole time. Like, for example, this session that you guys are in right now may not be the best session for students because it's just me talking the entire time. And well, hopefully you aren't bored. Your students would probably be pretty bored. So you want to make sure you're not doing that. All right. One of the biggest things I hear that people struggle with inside of Google Meet are the different presentation options, either why they exist, what they do, what's the difference between the two, or having to share and reshare your screen to get everything to show the way you want it to. As I first learned Google Meet, I would join as a host from my computer and then join as a participant from my phone so I can kind of see what the different presentation features look like. And then now I feel like I have it down to a little bit of a science that I'm confident to not join on my phone anymore. So the first one is to present your entire screen. So when you do this, anything you do on your computer screen will show. This is great if you have offline documents, maybe on your desktop that you'd like to share, or if you're switching between different windows. So right now on my screen, if I were to present my entire screen, you would see this presentation in a little corner of my screen, and then you would see all of your faces, and in the chat, you would see that as well, because I'm looking at all of those things at the same time. Yeah, so Tammy, and this is great, and this has probably become like a Proverbs of 2020. I like to join on a second device so I don't have to ask, can you see my screen? Now, sometimes I still do ask that, even though I know I'm sharing the right thing, because there is a lag with internet sometimes. And while you may start talking about something because you see it on your screen, they may not quite see it just yet. So sometimes I do ask, but between that, is your mic on mute, or I can hear you, I feel like are all new things in 2020 that we never thought we'd have to say. Yeah, and then Erica says it's an interaction with the audience, which is also great, getting them to participate quickly or easily without a lot of thought behind it. The next presentation option, and the one I'm using today, is just presenting a window. So this is great if you want to be able to see the chat, see the audience, and then see your presentation at the same time. This is also great if you plan on changing between tabs. Like, for example, I'm showing my presentation, but there was a hyperlink that opened into a new tab that I wanted you guys to see, which is why I chose to use that. And then the last one, which most people default to because they say the least amount that you're sharing is usually a best practice, is a Chrome tab. So this is like a window to where this is great to where you can see multiple things on your screen at the same time, work out the kinks and logistics without everybody else having to see that. But the biggest problem I know for me with the Chrome tab is if I'm on conference with students or another teacher and I'm showing them one tab, but then a hyperlink opens to another tab, I have to stop sharing, reshare so they can see that second tab. Sometimes you may not run into that problem if you only plan on showing that one tab. Other times you may run into that problem. And hopefully you have an audience that will tell you either you're not seeing the screen that they're talking about or that you're talking about. But if not, that's again, like Erica said, where that interaction with the audience is a great idea. Yeah, Sue said that's why it's nice to have a co-presenter who can tell you if something's not working or if there's a lag. Co-presenter is also great to put links in the chat or things like that. If you have a student who loves to help, we have jobs in our classroom. Why not have jobs on our Google Meet as well? Maybe you can send students the links that you plan on sharing and have them do that for you within the chat and help you monitor the chat and be kind of like your co-presenter. Yeah, so Karen says she has a student teacher that does that. Yeah, so Sue just said that as well. Could make a fun class job. Erica says, in Chrome, it asks if I want to share the new tab when I change tabs that I'm viewing. Very cool. Yeah, so all of this to say, just be cognizant of what you're choosing and making sure it's exactly what you want people to see, either by asking in the audience, are you seeing this? This is what you should be seeing, or joining from another device or having some sort of co-presenter help you. All right, so this is probably something that is not shared a ton, but something that I find the most beneficial for me, and that's how to situate your screen. In a perfect world, everybody has double monitors or two devices where they're able to see everything at the same time. But that's not always the case. Like, I know for me, working at home, I don't have a double monitor. And when I'm presenting, I want to make sure that I can still see the chat, that I can still see you guys, the participants, and the presentation at the same time. Because in my opinion, there's nothing worse than just being able to see the presentation and not know what's going on in the chat or not knowing how you guys are reacting to the presentation. Because like Erica said, you use that important interaction. So it's actually pretty simple, but I situate my screen and kind of play with it a little to see everything by using two windows. And you can follow the directions kind of there. In one of my windows, I have only my Google Meet. And then I also have a document with all the links that I plan on sharing. So it's easy and right there, and then I can post into the chat. And then in my other window, I have my presentation, things that I'll use during the presentation. And then I just use that green circle button on the left-hand side of my browser to make both of my Chrome windows smaller so I can see them both at the same time. So I've actually made a YouTube video about that if you're not sure or understanding how I'm doing that here, but that ensures that I can see my presentation. I don't need to see the whole thing because I made it. I know what it looks like. And then I can see the chat. I can see you guys at the same time to get that interaction going. Something I've also found is instead of just pressing present, when I'm going to present, I actually use the drop-down arrow and go to presenter view, and that prevents Google Slides from taking over my whole entire screen so I can't see you. Tab Scissors is a Chrome extension that does it automatically. Super helpful and one button to push. Erica is nodding her head. Super helpful for them to have a split screen. Yeah, very cool, Kimber. Thanks for sharing. I know that is probably the most important thing for me, is being able to see everything, feeling in control of everything. So either just doing in two windows, two devices, or checking out that extension that Kimber just mentioned in the chat is a great way to kind of get that going. All right, so on the topic of being able to see everything, it's really important to utilize the chat, and hopefully that is a feature that you guys are doing with your students, or a practice that you're making. I know I taught homeschool students last year from across the state. There were about 10 of them, and none of them knew each other because they were coming in from different locations. But we used the chat like crazy, and it is something that I had to monitor all the time, because the side conversations that would occur because they were so excited to type into the chat was pretty funny. So I found that some students may not like to share on their screen or share with their volume, but they may love to share in the chat. And if that's something that you guys have found already, please let me know in the chat. How do your students like to talk to you? So I found it's just a really easy way to engage your audience. So like I just said, share, you guys go ahead in the chat, share with me how you guys connect with your students, how you use the chat. You can do it with your students, refer to it in the entire presentation. I know some people wait until the very end of a presentation to look at all the comments in the chat. I think it's really important to acknowledge what's happening in the chat as it's happening, so people know that I am seeing what you guys are typing and how it's relevant to what we're specifically talking about. Yeah, so Kimber says, we've been doing good things in the chat to start class every day, which has been fun. So that brings in that social emotional learning. Good. Erica says, if you have a tablet or a phone you're using as a dot cam or whiteboard, you can use QuickTime. If anyone wants to know about that and doesn't already, I can share. Erica, if we have time at the end, that'd be awesome for you to share. And then agreed, yeah, using the chat, because otherwise it's not interactive, and who wants to sit and just listen to somebody talk without having any sort of opinion? And then just another best practice is refer to people by name in the chat, so people feel like you're acknowledging what they're saying and that what they're saying is important because you're recognizing it. And then just the last thing is just making sure that you are monitoring the chat if you're allowing that feature to be open to students, because it can get out of hand. They can get very excited and start writing in all caps or talking about things that aren't necessarily relevant. Like, for example, I had students turn on closed caption. They loved it, but then it was very hard to regain their attention because they're like, oh, when Miss Hurst said this, look how closed captioned said it, and it's not the same. So just be mindful of that. And if you're going to leave the chat on, make sure you're monitoring it. So I think Fairbanks School District, you guys have already, you got this today, but Google Meet is putting out new features constantly, and they just rolled out some moderator controls. If you haven't seen it yet, Google does slow release where different school districts receive it at different times. But if you're in the chat and you click on people, you should see host controls. And one of the controls is turning off the chat. I strongly suggest this is not something that you do. Maybe it's good at times to turn it off, but you want that interaction going. So just know you do have that control to turn it on or off, allows participants to share or not share that screen, give you more control over your Meet with students. Yeah, so Tammy says, Yo Teach is a new back channel that has quickly replaced today's Meet as a back channel. Very cool. And then Erica says, I'm going to want to chat when I get to teach in person again. Yeah, the chat has been one of those amazing things that's come out of COVID-19, so to say, or COVID-20 now, I guess. And then sometimes what I do in my presentations, if I have a presentation, I'll try to remind myself to go back to the chat by writing on my slide, in the chat, ... as my headline, and using an arrow to point to the chat. It's not only remind students or teachers where they can find it, but also to remind myself okay, Chelsea, it's been a while since you've referred to it. Here's kind of this canned question. I want you to ask people in the chat in case I forget to include them on my own. Awesome. So some of you guys said you don't have Twitter. If you don't, I strongly suggest that you maybe look into it, because the amount of ed tech or just teaching practices that are going on right now is absolutely insane. Lots of really great stuff, but then also lots of stuff that we need to talk about and consider as well before we put into practice. And one of the biggest things that I've seen are expectations for your Google Meet. So things that I've seen are just teachers doing the same expectations that they may have in their classroom, or things like dress professional, sit up straight, keep your camera on, always look at the screen, no eating, no dogs, no this, no that. Lots of really, really kind of strict expectations. And I'm not the master of creating expectations, nor do I know what works best in your classroom, but I just want to give these questions to you guys for you to consider before you start creating your expectations. Because maybe students don't have their chat on, or not their chat, their video on, because their data plan at home can't support it, or their parents don't want them to have their screen on. When you talk about eating at home, I like TikTok. I watch TikTok a lot, and it's actually really cool as an educator to be on TikTok, because students are providing a lot of feedback. And one of the funniest TikToks that I saw was just a student, and it said, when my teacher told me not to eat on a Zoom meeting, are they really telling me I'm not allowed to eat in my own house? So just consider those things that students, if they're joining, they're invested, they want to be there. Allow them to show up as themselves, and consider these questions and things that may not allow them to participate in the way that you want them to. Just because it's not what you think is ideal or what you think is best doesn't mean that they're not giving their best to you. So always consider that. Yeah, so like Tammy said, talk and consider before putting it into practice, because the ultimate goal is, why do we not want them to eat? Why do we want them to keep their camera turned on? I know for me, I would love for all of their cameras to turn on, because then it makes me feel more comfortable in the presentation. But is that really the best for the students? Does that make them feel more comfortable? Or does that make them constantly looking at their picture to see if they look okay and not invested in what's going on in your conversation? So just consider those expectations as you set them. Are you just posting them because they're what you normally do in your classroom, or what the mainstream media is doing? Or is it really beneficial and creating equity for all of the students in your classroom? Then if you guys have any expectations that you found have worked well, or things that you've had to change for your classroom, please share that with us in the chat. And then even just the expectation of find a quiet place. I know at my house, it's even hard for me to find a quiet place, because they're doing construction at my next door neighbor's house that you can hear through the house. And on the other side of my house, people are playing music, or there's loud cars, or there's dogs and people walking by. So even for me, and an adult, it's hard for me to find a quiet place. Just imagine a student who maybe has younger siblings, or a parent working from home, or 27 dogs, or whatever it may be. Let's try not to stress them out about the little stuff, and just focus on what matters, and that's our time with them and our instruction. All right. So something about Google that is awesome is that they respond really well to feedback. If you look at any of the Google applications like Docs, Slides, even Meet, if you go to the pancake, the 3 vertical dots, there's a lot of times a question mark where you can go and receive help, and there's also a feedback button. If Google gets an overwhelming amount of similar feedback, they most of the times put that to practice, which is why now that we've moved to remote learning, there's a lot of Google Meet updates that are coming or have yet to come. So I just wanted to go over some of those with you. Yeah, Erica, I like your expectations there, and how you put it on your first slide. So everybody, as they know, can see those and be reminded of the expectations for the meeting. So just some disclaimers before we talk about these updates are not all districts have purchased Google Enterprise or have rapid release, and both of those things will matter. I can tell you right now what is true for my school district is not true for Fairbanks School District, so just keep that in mind. First thing is Google Meet or Google for Education as you know it is changing. And the biggest things, if you haven't purchased Enterprise or if your district hasn't, is that you'll lose recording privileges on September 30th. You'll still be allowed to temporarily record, but to me that's almost useless because they can't be downloaded, they can't be saved, and they can't be shared outside of your domain, which a lot of the things that I do are shared outside of my domain. And then you'll only be able to have 100 participants instead of 250. Now, I'm pretty sure that Fairbanks School District did purchase Enterprise, so that will not apply to you guys. And this is just a document that you guys can click on that talks about all of the updates that are happening in Google. These don't really give the suggested timeline of when they occur, but in the chat, you guys can find the link and kind of look at the different things that you guys can expect. We're not going to go over all of them because we don't have enough time, but in the next slide, it kind of highlights that again. So things to expect for just Google Meet. So Google for Education, like for example, YKSD, we did not purchase Enterprise, so we can only expect what's labeled under Google Meet to come. And then Fairbanks, I believe you guys did purchase Enterprise, so there are some features that you guys should expect to come and some timelines of when to expect them, in addition to all of the Google Meet features that are coming out. So today you guys should have received more moderator controls to help give you control of the meeting, but then there's also some other things that are exciting that are coming you guys can expect. All right, and we are just out of time, trying to keep it really hard to the 30 minutes because your time is valuable. Here's a link to a feedback survey just to let us know what you guys thought, what you'd like to see from us in the future. GEG Alaska is a brand new group. We haven't officially launched. We'll be doing so at the end of the month. We hope that we see you guys there, and then we'll move towards a more structured and long-term plan to provide professional development and connect with you guys and other educators across the state who have been using Google products. If you haven't already, sign up for our Google group. This is an asynchronous way for you guys to ask questions if you have them as they come up, or just receive information about the professional development that we're offering. And then we're also giving away GEG Alaska stickers. So there's a form to where if you fill out your address, I'll mail you a sticker. Like Karen, you definitely need to get on our Google group and fill that out because Karen is like our trusty participant. She's been to all of our meetings, so I definitely want to get some stickers to her. So you can visit our website, and on our website, you'll find out how to join the Google group, events that we have coming up, and all of those good things. Oh, you thought, Karen, maybe you did join the group, but I'm not sure that you filled out the sticker form. So just make sure you've done that again, and I'll check as well. And then Kimber asked to post the link to the slides again. So there is that link to the slides. And then just the very second to last thing, we are officially launching. We have a surprise guest who's going to be presenting, which is going to be really awesome. We're also going to talk a little bit in depth of what GEG Alaska is, what the Google group is, and best practices on how to use it, and then our plan moving forward, because we do want to be able to continue to meet and share just our knowledge on Google for a long-term amount of time. And then these are just some ways you can connect with us. So just our website, how to join our group, our email, as well as our Twitter account. And then we're always looking for more presenters because the idea is it's not just going to be myself or the core group who founded GEG Alaska presenting, but that we're really putting the knowledge in the hands of all of the educators around the state. So if you're interested in presenting, just shoot GEG Alaska an email as well, and we can get that going. Yeah, so Tammy says the Google group has really come in handy for troubleshooting and getting quick Alaskanized. I like that answer to a Google question. Awesome. All right. Are there any questions or anything before we go? It is exactly 8 o'clock, so I don't want to hold you longer than what you committed to. So Erica asked, what is meant by a back channel? So a back channel is just a way to communicate with the other hosts, without interrupting the presentation. So if I had a back channel with Tammy, I might say, hey, can you post this link in the chat? But then I'm only telling her and I'm not telling everybody that. Tammy, do you want to elaborate on a back channel a little bit more?
It can also be used in the classroom. Like it depends on the kids, if it works with your kids, but you might want to have a back channel going while you're teaching. And then the kids can say, I missed what she said about, this topic. And then somebody could help kind of fill that in. So it's where they can ask questions maybe and get an answer without interrupting your teaching or your presentation. So a lot of times when I do a presentation, then I have a back channel going. I used to have Today's Meet going all the time during like conference presentations. And that way people can share the information without having to ask a question publicly. Does that help?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. All right, if you have any other questions, feel free to ask in the chat or take over the mic. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.